Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
Did you know that the liver is the largest organ in the body? Well, technically, skin is the largest organ in the body. And many times we don't think about our skin as being an organ, but it certainly is. Now, the liver is a very important organ, and it is critical to nearly all biological functions in the body. And there is a high rate of chemical reactions that make the liver uniquely susceptible to chemical stresses and inflammation, as well as loss of energy balance and function, which can lead to a number of progressive liver disorders and diseases, and none more important than when we look at non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now, this is very, very important because we realize that over the course of the last, let's just say 15 years, liver-related deaths have jumped 65% in this country. That is correct. When we look at mortality due to cirrhosis and liver cancer in the United States between the years of 1999 and 2006, it has gone up over 65%. And that is incredibly scary. We can look at a lot of different factors in terms of why the rate has gone up so high and so fast. Certainly diet plays a really big role into this. When you look at the rate of metabolic syndrome in this country, for example, that is a perfect example as to why this has become such a major problem. And I mean, that's just an astronomical jump. I mean, 65% increase in liver-related deaths in just a 15-year time span. Now, we used to always think that the main threat to the liver was alcohol, alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver. And then, of course, we know about the different viruses that target the liver, such as hepatitis, but we don't oftentimes think about the foods that we're eating and how detrimental those can be. But we have to look at other things. Remember, this is our detoxifying organ. So we have to look at air pollution. We have to look at toxins that we're exposed to from what we breathe in, from what we put on our skin, from what we have on our foods, for example. And so this is why it's important that we take care of our liver as we get older. This is something that you don't want to wait until something goes haywire and then decide to act. So I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and I want to talk about some of the factors that are behind liver disease that can cause chronic liver injury and certainly lead to an increased risk for things such as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, liver cancer, cirrhosis of the liver, and clearly liver failure. Well, we can look at the role of alcohol and understanding that is a major driver. We can look at excess use of things such as acetaminophen, which is also known as Tylenol. We know that many people in this country utilize this on a regular basis for their aches and their pains. But we really need to focus in on obesity and that excess body weight that contributes to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And almost 40% of adults are clinically obese in this country. And that's a major problem. So what can we be doing? What is it that would be beneficial for us? Well, first, we want to make sure that we have healthy lifestyle. We want to make sure that we have foods that have powerful antioxidants to help those little hepatocytes, those little tiny liver cells, be able to do what we need it to do, go through all those different phases of detoxification. Now, many people have probably heard of milk thistle. And milk thistle contains several natural compounds that have been shown that have the ability to basically defend the liver from injury. And these compounds work by multiple different mechanisms in terms of enhancing liver function and leading to liver protection. So when we think about milk thistle, I want us to look at some of the clinical science behind it. We know that milk thistle and its constituents, silymarin in particular, are very powerful ways in which the liver can utilize that as kind of a scrubber and goes through and can help scrub out those bloated up hepatocytes. But I also want to talk about some of the other ways in which milk thistle has been shown through the years to be very beneficial, even outside of the liver. And I think that this is always important to talk about, because when we are thinking about utilizing a particular supplement or a nutrient for a particular health concern, sometimes we don't realize all of the other many benefits that we can yield from that. So milk thistle itself contains all of these different compounds. So it has powerful antioxidants in it and these phytochemicals, including things such as silibinin and silymarin. And we realize that it is these two constituents, the silymarin and the silibinin, that really yield a enormous amount of antioxidant capability, which is important to fend off oxidative stress within the liver. So I want to talk about a study that came out in the Journal of Phytomedicine, where they were looking at the effects of silymarin extract on antioxidant status in the human body, as well as high sensitivity C-reactive protein in patients who had type 2 diabetes. Now, why is that important? Because we know people who have type 2 diabetes are more prone to the development of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So let's just look at this particular study and see what they actually determined. So this was a randomized clinical trial that was conducted to look at that real impact of silymarin supplementation on oxidative stress, looking at different indices, as well as looking at high sensitivity C-reactive protein, which remember is looking at systemic inflammation. So in this was a triple-blinded placebo-controlled trial. So they took type 2 diabetics that were between the ages of 25 and 50 years old who were on medication. Now, this is important to notate. I'm not talking about diabetics who are in their 70s or 80s. We're talking about diabetics who are between the ages of 25 and 50 years old, who are already showing signs of significant inflammation and not so great antioxidant status, which is not a good thing when you take someone who's 25 years old and you put a chronic disease on them, such as diabetes, and then we add insult to injury. So what they found was when they gave these folks silymarin coming from the milk thistle extract, there was a significant reduction in high sensitivity C-reactive protein levels by upwards of 27% compared to the placebo group. Up to 27% reduction in systemic inflammation in that group that was given silymarin, milk thistle. Now, we think about milk thistle and we think about the liver. But this was actually assessing systemic inflammation. And they were looking at their blood samples. They were looking at these antioxidant indices. And they found that silymarin supplementation improves the antioxidant indices in things like superoxide dismutase, which is very important for diabetics because we know in diabetics, SOD levels have a tendency to sharply decline, which is really a bad thing when we realize we need SOD for vascular support. So when they have assessed SOD levels in diabetics, they usually find that that level is low, their superoxide dismutase level is low, and they have more of a likelihood of having their coronary artery leading into their brain being stenotic, meaning it's narrowing. And part of that narrowing is because of that lack of SOD. And so they found that the silymarin, the milk thistle itself, actually could help to enhance the SOD levels. This is absolutely fabulous, on top of the fact that it's also targeting systemic inflammation. So this is a really positive way to look at milk thistle. And as I mentioned, there's study after study showing the impact of milk thistle when it comes to those with diabetes, those with prediabetes or metabolic syndrome. We have also seen the role that milk thistle could play in terms of slowing or even preventing the growth of colorectal cancer cells. And in 2015, researchers at the American Association for Cancer Research, they reported a role for milk thistle in terms of reducing the colorectal cancer stem cell growth. So this is just one more area in which we don't even recognize milk thistle can potentiate all of these really wonderful benefits. Now, here's an interesting thing. In the National Cancer Institute Journal, and this was over 20 years ago, they published findings on silymarin from milk thistle as being protective against skin cancer. Yes, non-melanoma skin cancer is the most common cancer among humans, and they found that milk thistle, that we always just think of for liver health, could be utilized as being helpful in targeting skin cancer. Once again, stopping that replication of those cells. This is incredibly powerful information. And we know that silymarin is this family, basically, of flavonoids. And we find that through clinical research that the silymarin itself is doing so much more than we ever imagined that it did. We thought, okay, it's a powerful antioxidant. It helps with the liver for the filtration process and detoxification. But now we know it's actually targeting things such as NF-kappa beta. So powerful inflammatory inhibition. We recognize that it can also target things such as COX-2, which is a very important inflammatory pathway in the body, which is why when they gave silymarin to diabetics, they saw their C-reactive protein levels coming down. So we see study after study that show what it is that milk thistle can actually do for the human body. But I want to talk about a few other areas in which it has been shown to have some very powerful effects. Besides that of skin health, besides that of liver health, besides that of helping to support those who have diabetes. We've also seen it studied in the setting of depression, cardiovascular disease. And knowing what we now know about milk thistle and how it's working to regulate different markers for inflammation and the way cells are communicating and fending off oxidative stress, then it makes sense that the research looking at milk thistle has become so expansive. So here's a really fascinating study. It's roughly about 10 years old. And this was in the Neuropsychopharmacology journal back in 2011. And they were talking about utilizing milk thistle in the treatment of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is really quite unique, right? And you would think, well, how is it that, what mechanism of action would it be that milk thistle could actually be beneficial? How is this even possible? So they actually compared giving folks who had OCD either fluoxetine, which is a SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, or milk thistle, giving them the silymarin. And in doing this particular study, they were looking for an alternative treatment that would be useful to enhance the effectiveness of maybe their conventional treatment that they're on, or something that maybe if they were not responding to traditional pharmacological treatments, could they use this plant that they've heard all about, does all these different things. It's safe in humans in terms of looking at any side effects. So the objective of this study was to compare the efficacy of the Silymarin versus fluoxetine in the treatment of OCD. Now, this was an 8-week piloted double-blind randomized trial. And they took patients who had been diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, and they either gave them Silymarin, milk thistle, or they gave them fluoxetine, the SSRI, for 8 weeks. And interestingly enough, they did not detect any difference between the two groups, meaning that the group that was given Silymarin did just as well as the group that was given the standard line of treatment, which is fluoxetine. So now that we know a little bit more about milk thistle, and we see, yes, our liver is incredibly important, being the largest organ in the body for all these numerous functions and removing all these different toxins. And we realize that the rate of liver disease is going up exponentially, brought on by diet. And we realize that milk thistle has been shown in trial after trial for decades now to help to protect the liver from a variety of different injuries. But now we see beyond that tunnel, and we can see its benefits in terms of cellular division, in terms of glucose management, in terms of mood health. And this is why I wanted to highlight milk thistle for you today. So we can understand that things that come from nature can really give us so much more than we even recognize. And I think that milk thistle is a perfect example of one of those nutrients. So that is all that I have for you for today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health Podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Do make sure that you subscribe and you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health Podcast.